Shalom, shalom. Before you bring any food to your mouth, there is an instant, an almost invisible instant, which most people ignore. A second of transition between matter and consciousness, between impulse and intention. That second, in the Hebrew tradition, is not filled with silence. It is filled with a blessing, Berachot, and that changes everything, because what you have in front of you is not just an apple, a piece of bread, or a glass of water. It is the result of a cosmic chain. Earth, rain, sun, energy, time, life, divine will. Without a blessing, it is only matter. With a blessing, it becomes something more, a bridge between the physical and the eternal. The Mishnah teaches that whoever eats without blessing acts as if the world had no owner, but whoever blesses recognizes the true structure of reality. They are not just giving thanks, they are reordering the universe in miniature, aligning that moment of consumption with its source. Today we are going to study something that goes far beyond formal religion. We are going to study how the word, when pronounced with awareness, can alter the spiritual function of matter. We are going to analyze how an act as everyday as eating can become an act of power, elevation, and protection. And this is where a concept that many know from another tradition comes in: holy water in exorcisms. What happens when a human being takes a common element, imbues it with intention, invokes the divine, and transforms it into an instrument against chaos? Today we are going to unite these two worlds, not from superstition, but from the profound spiritual structure that both traditions reveal. Because the question that guides this class is not, what am I eating? The real question is, what does reality become when I pronounce a sacred word over it? And when you understand that, you will never eat the same way again. Your host, Abel Flores, is very happy that you are here with us on Mishna TV, sharing your time for these studies of the Mishnah and metaphysics, which have the ultimate goal of helping you understand the world around us much better. Get ready, because we are about to begin. The Mishnah we are studying today continues to analyze the blessings before eating, and this time it establishes that in certain cases, a more general blessing can fulfill the obligation of a more specific one. Because, as we studied the last class, just as there is a diversity of foods according to their species, as the creation account in Genesis relates, so too there are different prayers for each of these species. If you haven't seen that class, you can go to our playlist on our La Mishnah TV channel and enjoy all the classes of this free course. Also, remember to subscribe and give us a like. Now, let's continue. This teaching today is located in the tractate of Berachot, chapter 6, Mishnah 2, and it says the following: whoever recites, "He who creates the fruit of the earth" over a fruit of the tree fulfills his obligation, because the tree also comes from the earth and is included in that broader category. But whoever recites, "He who creates the fruit of the tree" over fruits that grow from the earth does not fulfill his obligation, because the blessing for the tree is more specific and does not encompass all the products of the earth. And over all types of food, if one recites, "By whose word all things were created," Shehakol bediavad, one fulfills his obligation, since this is the most general and all-encompassing blessing. Now, let me begin with a little intrigue, one of those that makes you take a deep breath and wonder. How can something as small as a blessing over an apple reveal an entire spiritual and legal architecture of Judaism? Yes, you heard right, a simple apple, a humble tomato, or even a piece of bread hide behind them a finely calibrated system that our sages designed to train human consciousness. And it is in Mishnah Berakhot 6.2 where this mechanism is revealed with almost surgical precision, but also with a pedagogical tenderness that is worth savoring. The Mishnah tells us, almost with unintentional rabbinic humor, if you say Borei Peri Ha'adama, he who creates the fruit of the earth, over a fruit of the tree, you have fulfilled your obligation. If you do the opposite and say Borei Peri Ha'etz, he who creates the fruit of the tree, over something that sprouts from the earth but is not the fruit of a tree, you have not fulfilled your obligation. And if you opt for the most general blessing of all, Shehakol bediavad, by whose word everything was created, then mysteriously you always fulfill your obligation. Now, this is not simply a manual for avoiding mistakes in the kitchen before the Shabbat dinner. It is, in reality, a lesson on how halakha works and on how we think about reality itself. First, let's consider the hierarchy of blessings. It's fascinating. Halakha establishes levels of specificity, from hamotzi, the blessing over bread, the undisputed king of the Jewish table, to Shehakol, the blessing over the generic universe. It's as if tradition wants to tell us, the more specific your perception, the more refined your spirit. But at the same time, the more general your blessing, the more encompassing your vision of the world. A delightful paradox. Let's begin with the first case. The Mishnah says that if someone, by mistake or distraction, because we've all had that moment of picking up an apple and hesitating between ha'etz and ha'adamah, recites ha'adamah over a fruit of a tree, they have fulfilled their obligation. Why? Because every tree, before being a tree, before stretching its branches toward the sky, before producing sweetness for humans, was born from the earth. The Rambam and the Bartanura explain it clearly. The description remains true. The earth is the nourishing mother of the tree, and halakha honors the truth, even if it is a broad truth. Now, imagine a simple scene. Someone picks up a red apple, one of those that look like they were just painted by a Renaissance artist. Ideally, they should say hayitz, but if they say ha'adamah, it doesn't destroy the spiritual universe of the blessing. They simply pronounce it from a more general level. In practice, they don't repeat the blessing and move on. Life continues, and so does the fruit. But when we move to the second case, the tone changes. Here the Mishnah is emphatic. If one says borei peri ha'etz over a product of the earth, they have not fulfilled their obligation. And here the halakhic logic is relentless. Not everything that comes from the earth is a tree. A tomato is not an apple, even if they feel like fraternal companions in a salad. A carrot doesn't have a trunk, or shade, or growth rings to count. Saying ha'etz over a vegetable is saying something that isn't true, and the halakha at this point does not compromise. The blessing must be repeated. It's not just about technical precision, it's about integrating reality as it is. The halakha educates our eyes, even before we taste the food. Now we come to the third act of this play, and here the Mishnah unfolds one of the deepest spiritual principles, Shehakol nihya bidvaro, a blessing that affirms that everything, absolutely everything, from soup to the song of a bird, exists by the divine word. This blessing, curiously the most general, is also the most universal. And our sages say, if you say it over any food, you have fulfilled your obligation, even over bread, even over wine, although, of course, it's not ideal. It's as if God, in a gesture of infinite compassion, were saying to us, I know you wanted to refine your consciousness, but if you didn't manage it today, I still embrace you. Later legal codes, from the Shulchan Aruch to the Shulchan Aruch Harav, insist on this idea. Shehakol functions as a spiritual safety net. It's the backup plan that prevents us from falling short when our minds are clouded or doubt paralyzes us. But, and here comes the point made by many contemporary rabbis, it shouldn't become a habit, because the purpose of the blessings is not to get by, but to learn to look at the world with discernment. It's like saying that one can live with a generic view of the landscape, but how beautiful it is when we begin to distinguish the colors of each leaf. And now let me close this exploration with a more spiritual touch. Blessings are not magic formulas or bureaucratic protocols. They are exercises in awareness. When we differentiate between ha'etz and ha'adamah, when we choose the correct blessing, we are training the mind to distinguish nuances, to recognize origins, to honor the precision of the created world. And when, in a moment of confusion, we say Shehakol and still fulfill the obligation, we learn that life has room for imperfection, for error, for humanity. Perhaps that is why Judaism insists so much on blessings, not to complicate our meals, but to remind us that every food is an opportunity to refine the soul, that every flute invites a small truth about the universe, and that every blessing, said with intention, connects us, even if only for an instant, with the creative word that sustains everything. So, the next time you have an apple, a carrot, or a latte in your hand, breathe, choose the correct blessing, and remember that, from the earth to the heavens, every word you utter can transform the world, even if only a little. So now we are in an old study hall, where the light barely enters through the windows, and the pages of the Talmud seem to breathe with us. Today we are going to walk together through the Talmudic development of a Mishnah small in size, but enormous in significance. And if in the end you feel that looking at a carrot will be a spiritual act, don't worry. That is exactly the intention of our sages. The Gemara, in Berachot, dedicates several pages from 35a to 40b to dissecting, with the patience of a watchmaker, the logic behind the blessings over food. There they ask, for example, what is truly a peri ha'etz, and what belongs to ha'adamah? And yes, they even discuss whether the palm heart counts as a fruit of the tree or as a product of the earth. The Talmud has that charm. You go in looking for spirituality and end up learning applied botany. But they don't stop there. The sages also analyze the state of the food. If a fruit is pulverized or a vegetable is eaten in an unusual way, its blessing can descend to Shehakol. It's as if the food, when it degrades, loses part of its primary identity. And one could say that there is a beautiful metaphor here. When something loses its essential form, the way we name it before God also changes. The Gemara also asks, with very human honesty, what happens when one makes a mistake? And it answers with a logic that we already saw in the Mishna. If the general blessing encompasses the specific category, then yatzah, you have fulfilled your obligation. But if your blessing is narrower than the reality, then lo yatzah, you have not fulfilled your obligation. It is a subtle reminder that the acceptable error is one that remains true on a broad level, not one that confines reality in a mold that does not correspond to it. In the midst of these discussions, the Talmud always returns to two classic protagonists, bread and wine. Their importance is not only nutritional, but spiritual. Bread sustains, wine sanctifies. And yet, if someone recited Shehakol over them, most sages agree that they fulfilled their obligation. It is halakhic mercy at its finest. Centuries later, the Rambam organizes this entire system with the precision of a great architect. Clear categories, firm definitions. Logical applications. The Shulchan Aruch takes that architecture and turns it into operative law. There, a key idea is repeated. Always strive for the correct blessing. But if you said Shehakol, don't panic. The basic connection remains intact. And it is here that halakhic technique transforms into spiritual teaching. Each specific Berachot invites us to contemplate the concrete origin of what we eat. Does it come from a tree that lives for years? Does it come directly from the earth? Is it the bread that sustains us? The more precise the blessing, the finer our awareness of the world. But halakha, wise like few traditions, avoids paralyzing perfectionism. It knows that we are human, that we get distracted, that sometimes life moves faster than our words. That is why Shehakol exists, which functions as a divine cushion. Even when we don't get it right, we still affirm that everything was created by the Word. This balance between rigor and mercy is profoundly pedagogical. It invites us to study, to distinguish, to refine our perspective, but also to breathe, to accept that mistakes do not break the bond with the Creator. Halakha is not an exam, it is a path. In practice, the Mishnah gives us clear rules. If you have a fruit from a tree, the ideal is to say ha'etz, although ha'adamah and Shehakol work if you made a mistake. If you have vegetables or tubers, the correct blessing is ha'adamah, and if you said ha'etz, then you must repeat it. If you have bread, wine, meat, fish, or any other food, each has its specific blessing. But if you said Shehakol, most sages tell you, relax, you fulfilled your obligation. And now, let me close with the essential point. This Mishnah teaches us that the world is full of divine details hidden in the everyday. Eating is not an automatic act, but an opportunity to recognize, give thanks, and understand. It teaches us that we should honor God with precision, but also that God does not demand perfection from us, but sincerity. So the next time you pick up a piece of bread, a tomato, or a glass of wine, remember, it's not just about naming what you eat. It's about naming the origin, naming life, naming creation itself, because in every blessing, great or small, specific or general, there is a small bridge between our world and the word that sustains it. Now we've reached the halfway point of this class, so we're going to take a short break to let you know that if you'd like to make a donation, you can do so by scanning the QR code you see on the screen, or you can also do so by clicking the link below in the description of this video. Personally, I, Abel Flores, sincerely thank you for your contribution, because it helps us a lot in continuing to produce all this content, which is free for everyone, and thus giving more people the opportunity to learn about these ancient teachings. You can also help us a lot by subscribing to this channel, La Mishna TV, giving us a like, and sharing this video on your social media and messaging apps. Thank you very much. In addition, you should know that on our website, lamishna.com, you will find all these classes, supporting materials, texts, articles, reports, and supplementary information for our free course on the Mishnah. Now, don't go anywhere, because we're continuing with our class. Let me begin with a simple image. Imagine you are holding a food item in your hand, an apple, a piece of bread, perhaps some rice. It seems like an everyday thing, almost trivial. But in the Jewish view, that small moment contains a silent spiritual drama. A food item is waiting for something from us. Not a spell, not a magic formula, but an act of recognition. And that act is called a barakah, blessing. Judaism insists on something radical. The blessing doesn't create anything new. It reveals what is already there. The Talmud states it unequivocally in Berachot 35a. It is forbidden to enjoy this world without a berachah. Whoever does so is like one who commits sacrilege. It's a strong, almost unsettling statement. But at its core lies a profound idea. God has already infused spiritual energy into every element of creation. The Berachot doesn't add light. It simply ignites the lamp of our consciousness. It activates the relationship between the human being and that which they are about to consume. The great masters, the Ramban, the Maharal, the Ramchal, and the Lurianic Kabbalah tradition go even further. They say that before reciting the Berachah, the food is in a profane state, whole. It's not bad, it's just waiting. But when one blesses with intention, what happens is an ascent. The food rises to the status of mutar, of permitted, of elevated. Its energy, that spiritual spark called nitzotz, is released from the merely material and returns to its divine root. It doesn't change the chemistry, but it does change its spiritual function. It's as if the food ceases to be an object and transforms into a bridge. The Kabbalah explains it in its characteristic language. Every food item possesses two layers, nefesh habahamit, the most basic vital energy, and nitzotz eloki, the latent divine spark. If we eat without a berachah, the energy remains trapped on the animalistic plane. It nourishes us, of course, but it doesn't ascend. If we eat with a berachah, those sparks rise, reintegrating themselves into the movement of creation. Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin accurately summarizes it in Nefesh HaChaim. The blessing extracts the spiritual portion from the food and elevates it, while the materiality remains subordinate to holiness. A phrase worthy of framing on the dining room table. And here a fascinating idea emerges. Before the blessing, the food belongs to the world of action, Olam Ha'asiyah, at its lowest level. It is mixed with Klipat Noga, an ambiguous zone that can ascend or descend according to our choice. After the blessing, the food changes its function. It ceases to be an object intended for physical pleasure and becomes part of a chain that connects the body with God. And I'm not exaggerating. Lurianic Kabbalah sees in every conscious act of eating a process of tikkun ha'achilah, a spiritual repair of the world. Eating becomes applied theology. But all this would be incomplete without talking about the diner, without talking about ourselves. Because the blessing doesn't just transform the food, it transforms the person. The Maharal and the Ramchal say that blessing before eating refines us. It redirects the appetite, elevates the desire, transforms a basic impulse into an act of dot, of consciousness. The Zohar adds a provocative nuance. Eating without a blessing generates spiritual heaviness, mental confusion, energetic disorder. In some way, the blessing is a filter, an internal ordering, a protection. And perhaps the most beautiful teaching is that of the Baal Shem Tov. The blessing allows body and soul to work together, that the material becomes a vehicle for the transcendent, that biting into a fruit becomes an act of unification. Food ceases to be an end and becomes a means. It ceases to be an isolated pleasure and becomes a form of connection. So the next time you take a bite, pause for a moment, a breath, a word. Remember that this food has sparks waiting to be released, that your own soul is waiting to tune into something higher. The blessing doesn't change the universe. It changes the way we inhabit that universe. And sometimes, with a simple word of gratitude, the whole world seems to straighten itself out a little. Imagine the scene calmly. A physical object, a glass of water, a piece of bread, a freshly cut fruit, and a word spoken with intention. Two distinct traditions, two different theological languages, but the same ancestral intuition. Matter can be elevated, resignified, consecrated, without ceasing to be matter. And if we understand this, we understand why this part is the heart of the lesson, the phrase that deserves to be the cover, title, and thumbnail. In Christian theology, holy water is a symbol of luminous clarity. It is ordinary water that receives a priestly blessing. It does not transform chemically. It does not become another substance, but its spiritual status does change. it becomes consecrated water, oriented towards purification, protection, and the preparation of the soul. It is a physical object invested with spiritual purpose. Nothing magical, nothing esoteric. It is an act of consecration through the word. Now let's return to Judaism, to our table and our Berachot, blessing. When a Jew pronounces a blessing over food, the chemistry doesn't change, but the spiritual function does. The apple, the bread, the cup of wine pass from whole, the ordinary, to kedusha, the sacred. The divine spark, the nitzotz, is released, ascends, and the food becomes a force for the sacred. It doesn't alter its taste, but it does alter its role. It doesn't change its physical structure, but it does change its place in the spiritual world. The material becomes a vehicle for mitzvah, commandment. And here we find the deepest conceptual parallel. In both traditions, a physical object receives a ritual word that redefines its meaning. The sacred formula does not modify the substance, but it does modify its function. In the language of religious phenomenology, the object crosses a boundary, from the profane to the consecrated. It is ontologically reoriented. Matter is not just matter. It is matter unfolded towards the divine. This is what makes this symbol so universal. Human beings, Jewish, Christian, or from any tradition that blesses what they touch, have the power to consecrate the world through the word. It can elevate a food item, it can purify an object, it can transform an everyday act into a spiritual action. It's not magic or superstition. It's a way of looking at reality, a way of connecting with God through the tangible. And yes, in Christianity, that same holy water has additional uses, including certain rituals of spiritual protection, even, in some traditions, in specific contexts, such as exorcisms. But that is a particular nuance within a broader principle. The essential point is this: the word consecrates, matter responds, and the world, for an instant, becomes a little brighter. Today we talked about food, but in reality, it was never about food. Today we talked about something much older, deeper, and more dangerous to ignorance: the power of the human word when it connects with the divine. We take a piece of bread, we observe it. It is flour, it is water, it is heat, it is time. From a scientific point of view, that's where the story ends. But from the point of view of the spirit, that's where it begins. Because that piece of bread, like all matter, has a memory, it has an origin, it has a spark, an intention sown in it from the beginning of creation. And when a person recites a blessing, they are not saying a religious phrase. They are taking their place in the order of the universe. They are returning that food to its source. They are releasing the spark that was trapped in the matter and elevating it to its true place. That is the essence of the blessing: to order the chaos, to reestablish the hierarchy, to remind matter who its owner is. Now, this doesn't only happen in Judaism. In another tradition, Christianity, there is an act that, in appearance, is different, but in essence works under the same spiritual logic. Holy water, used in exorcisms. Water in its natural state is one of the most neutral, simplest, and quietest elements in the world. It has no form of its own. It adapts, it flows, it accepts. But when the appropriate blessing is imprinted upon it, under spiritual authority, it ceases to be just water. Its chemical composition doesn't change. Its taste doesn't change. Its appearance doesn't change. What changes is its status in the invisible world. That water, which was ordinary, becomes consecrated. It ceases to belong to the profane order and comes to belong to the sacred order. And when it comes into contact with what represents darkness, disorder, rupture, or denial of God, it is no longer simply water. It is a reminder of the divine order breaking into the chaos. That is what happens in an exorcism, beyond the cinematic images or sensationalism. It is not a physical fight. It is a confrontation between two opposing principles: disorder against order, darkness against light, rupture against holiness. And just as holy water becomes an instrument of purification when it is blessed, food becomes an instrument of elevation when a blessing is pronounced over it. Two traditions, two languages, one same principle: the word, when aligned with God, transforms the function of matter. That's what you should take away with you today. Every time you drink a glass of water, eat a piece of fruit, have a drink, or any food whatsoever, you have a cosmic decision before you, even if you don't see it. Either you consume like an animal, driven only by instinct, or you eat like a conscious being who recognizes the source of all things, and in that brief instant, before you bite, before you drink, you have a power that neither kings nor armies can buy. The power to sanctify a moment of the world. That's what a blessing does. That's why it's dangerous for indifference. That's why it's uncomfortable for distraction. That's why it's sacred for those who understand. Because when you bless, you don't just elevate the food. You elevate yourself. You order your soul. And you push back, even if only a little, the darkness of the world. And now you know something that millions overlook every day. That a single word, spoken with awareness and reverence, can be more powerful than chaos, stronger than a shadow, and deeper than all the noise of this world. When you leave this class, don't leave the same. Look at your next meal with different eyes. Look at your next glass of water with different eyes. And remember this forever. Matter is common. Consciousness makes it sacred. That's all for today's class. Until the next video.